Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of my little Houdini project that I'm working on. Just a little title intro sequence for my Missing My Niche YouTube channel. If you missed part 1, that is just a couple videos back. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Basically what we did is we filled a cast with a liquid, and then the liquid began to dry, and we flipped it over, and this is the end result of that. Today for part 2, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a visual of this rough goop being like grinded down into and polished into something nice and smooth. So what we're going to do is have 2 drills come down, and they're going to go around these letters, and there's going to be sparks flying from them, and we're going to give the appearance of this dirty, primitive, like, see how it's just all textured? We're going to grind it down into something nice and smooth. So first thing that I noticed is our mold here that we had raise up. I think I want to hide it after it's reached its top peak. So we're actually going to hop into that, and let's check out our mold here. And let's just drop down a quick visibility node. Fire that in. And if we put the display flag, it hides it. Let's keyframe that. So I'm going to Alt and left click right here, and that'll keyframe it. Let's go back to 71 and expose it. We'll keyframe it. So at 72, it just disappears. We don't have to deal with that afterwards, being in our camera shots and stuff. Next thing I want to do, since this is like a multiple project thing, I think we want to organize this a little bit. So let's add a network box. This allows you to keep track of all of your different like geometry and SOPs and things like that, so when you're searching for certain parts of your simulation, you'll be able to find it a lot easier and to reference it. So all you do is you just drag these onto your network box here, and you can even name it. So we'll just call this liquid. So we have our first network box. Let's make a second one for the grinding. Let's call this grinding. Let's drop down a geo here and hide this animation, and we'll call this grinding, and pull up an object merge to reference our mold, our hardened liquid. So I believe it's in animation. Merge one. Okay, so we have our object here, and we're starting on frame 72 because that's the end of the first part where we flipped it over. So now we want to grind this down. So basically what I'm thinking we're going to do is we're going to pull up the font that we've already created, line it up, and then we'll just do like this smooth transition over it. So let's drop down another object merge. And let's go and find our original font that we already created. Cast maybe? Okay, so right here. So we already have the font, it's the right size and everything. We just want to bring that into our second geometry. We'll call this out font. Back in. And let's pull that in here. Cast out font. And so if we hit the template here, display flag. So we have them both here. Now we want to line this up with this. It might be easier to put the template here. So let's put down a transform. And we'll bring up our handles. We shouldn't need to move it on the x-axis at all, since we just flip it over. Let's turn it 180 degrees. And you can always adjust this later if it doesn't match up quite how you like it. Okay, so we'll leave that there for now. We can always change it later, but for now, we'll call that good. So let's drop down a delete node. And we can delete objects using a bounding box. Under here, go to bounding volume and enable a bounding box. And so now, any object in this bounding box will be deleted. And you can increase the size. Let's do that now. Oh, and we have to change our entity to points in this case. So see, any object that comes inside this bounding box will be deleted. So I just want this bounding box to sweep over the top, but I want to keep this bottom layer of this hardened liquid. So let's mess with the size just a little bit to get the proper dimensions that we're looking for. Okay, we want it to cover the whole thing, so let's increase the size on the X. Let's say 15. Nope, more than that. Not 100, 20. Okay, now we'll just scooch it down a little bit. Let's try 3.5. I want it a little bit higher. I like this curve up. I still want that to be attached to my smoothed out letter. So it's just a matter of fine tuning it. Okay, that's what I want. So we can animate this bounding box so that it'll sweep over our mold here, our letters. Let's move it on the x-axis. Let's try -10. We just want it just to the left. Right there. -20. Okay, we have that bounding box all set up. Let's just copy this bounding box here. Alt and left click to copy it. Cut that. Attach it right here. And we want this one to be at 0 because we want this one to be deleting our letters. And this one can be down a little more. So it's just completely covering it. Right now, our smoothed out letters are not exposed at all. Let's do a quick merge so I can see both of these objects in real time. Select delete. So now we can animate our bounding box moving across. So at 72, let's alt and left click at 20. And I want to grind this maybe 1.5 seconds. So let's go to 108 and change this to 0. I'm gonna hop into my animator editor to make a nice smooth transition so it's not ease in and ease out. I want it to be a straight line. There. So now as it moves across, sorry, my computer's acting real slow today. It'll just sweep across it and delete it. Like so. And we'll just do the same thing here, but for this delete node, we're moving it off of our smooth letters. So we want to, at 72, we want to keyframe it at 0. And then at 108, let's do it at 20. And make sure to have this straight as well. So now they should move at the same time. All right, so you see right here, it looks like it's being cleaned up to these nice smooth letters. It does look like there's a little bit of a gap. We want a little bit of an overlap so we don't have this gap exposed. We want our messy letters to overlap these smooth letters just a little bit. So on our first delete node, we want it to be back just a little more. Let's do this at -19.9. And on 108, let's do it at 0.1. Get right on a letter so we can test it out. I keep on overshooting it a little bit. Okay, so here we go. There's that overlap. You won't be able to see the gap that much, especially when you're looking at it head on. I think that will work for what we want. Let's check it out on the M. Yep, that looks good to me. Let's do a quick file cache here. Hopefully that speeds up our simulation. We'll just call this grinding. Make sure to save and cache this out. All right, we got that all cached out. Hit the display flag, load from disk. Hopefully it goes just a little bit faster. Yeah. Let's drop down a null. Call this out. Grinding. And now I think we can model our drills. I'm not going to be too complicated here. Just a pole from the ceiling, and then it's a little fatter at the bottom. And the idea is that they will be rotating really fast and just shaving off the top to make it nice and smooth. So let's drop down a geo. We'll call this drill. Dive inside. Down a just simple tube. And we want to reference our mold here so we can get the right size. So let's click on Ghost Other Objects. Now we can see that. We want to increase the height significantly because we want this pole to drop ideally from the ceiling. Raise up the center. And we want this to be really skinny, maybe 0.1. At least for now, we can always change it. And we want to change this to polygon. Let's add lots of columns to make it nice and smooth, and lots of rows, just so we can extrude this bottom part. Let's do that now. Click on my select tool. I want to select maybe the bottom 3 and do a poly extrude. Sorry, my keyboard for some reason whenever I type T it does 2 T's. I don't know why, it's weird. That might even be too big. That would be really fine. Let's decrease the size of the radius scale. There we go. Just so it's believable that it can get into these nooks and crannies, if you will. So, really simple drills. They're just going to be animated to drop down. They're going to go around here, and then they're going to go back up. So we can do the drop down right now. Well, we can do the drop down and going back up later. Right now, I want to create the path going around our mold. So let's just drop down a null right here for now. Out. See, whenever I do a T, it does too. Out drill. Okay, let's create a path. So I'm going to hold space and B to bring up my viewport options and go to the top. And I want to look at my objects, so I'll hold space and G. So now I can see clearly. I'm missing my niche. Let's make it so it's nice and smooth. And I want 2 drills. I want one to go around the top and one to go around the bottom. So we'll have to do 2 different paths. So this is kind of the quick and dirty way of doing things. It'll be moving so fast, I don't think you'll be able to see the imperfections, if you will. Let's go up to this shelf tool called Path. And everywhere you click is a point on the path. But it's kind of messy. Using network boxes, we can shrink this up afterwards, but it's going to create a point for each path, and it's going to go way down and clutter up our objects, but we can collapse that later, so don't worry about that. So let's go right in this middle of the M. You kind of want to be a little bit out because the drills ideally are going to look like they're going right up against the surface. So we don't want it right up against the edge because that would be the middle of the drill. Let's have it out just a little bit here. And let's go around the M. Just all the way around, but I'm only going to go to the top half. And press enter when you're done. So we have our path. You'll be able to see it better in perspective view. Okay, so you see our path. As you can see all the different geometry nodes that they made for it. Kind of annoying. But if we take down this grinding, you can see our path. And we want our drill to follow it. So let's clean this up, a little bit. I'm going to get on my select tool, and let's select all of these nodes here. Scroll back down and add network box. We'll just name this top path. Oh, 2 T's. I need a new keyboard. And collapse this. And you can put network boxes in other network boxes. So now we need to do the same thing for the bottom path. And now we'll just go along the bottom. And enter. We'll just do the same thing here, collapse this all. Bottom path. Alright, make sure to save. And we want our drills to follow along our paths. So I'm actually going to expand this top path. And you can see right here we have our path node, which represents the line going through all these different points. And then we just have each individual point itself. So let's go back to perspective view. And we can hide this for now. So this, what we're going to do now is make a chop. You can kind of tell what it is. It's basically, chop basically tells the object how to move and in what manner. You'll be able to see what I mean in just a second. So let's go to follow path. And at the bottom it says select object to create path constraint. And we want our drill here. Press enter. Now select path object. And we want our path 1. I'll select that and press enter. Select look at object if any. And we don't have any. Select lookup object if any. We don't have any. So now it creates a constraint for us. Look in our drill right here. We'll have this, you don't have to wire it in or anything. It's a chop network. When we dive in, this is the details for our path. And it immediately starts at frame 1 with position 0. And then going along, it's not lined up, but going along, it's going to follow this path up to 240, which is 1. So 1 is the end of the path, 0 is the end. We don't want it to start going until 72 because that's when our animation starts. So let's go to our position here, type in 0 and keyframe that. Oh, looks like we have to delete. Let's just delete all the other keyframes by holding Control Shift and left click. We just want this to be at 0. And at frame 72, we want also 0. And then we want it to finish at frame 108. Make this 1. And on our animator, make this a smooth line. Select it all. So now it doesn't start until here. It's going to drill out our letters. So you can see that it is too high up. We want this to lower down anyway, so we can do that in the transform node out here. our cast is going to go up after dropping down our liquid here, our hardened liquid. And while that's going up, we want these drills to come down. So at, let's say, 66, we want this to be pretty high. We want it like 20 up high. And then we want it to drop down at 72. Let's see, what, 0, we want it lower than that. We want it right here to drop down. Let's check out our mold here, because we only want to grind down to a certain level. Go back into our drill. And keyframe that. So it's going to come down as the molding goes up and go around our letters. Looking at this, I think that I may have made my drill too small. I was too concerned. But we can always change that. So let's go to our poly extrude, make this come out just a little bit. There we go, that looks better. So it's going, it's going. 108 is the end. Keyframe that. And then it's gonna shoot back up to 20. Okay, now as you saw, well, as you can imagine, our drill probably doesn't quite line up with our smoothing out process. So we can change that by hopping into our constraints here, and we can just keyframe it if it's a little behind or a little ahead. I'll just go every 6 frames and go through. Oh, looks like we got a little bit of a gap here, so we can fix that later. So 72. Oh, well, I'm gonna fix that right now. Alright, I got that all sorted out. Apparently, I don't remember how negative numbers work, but we just, I just adjusted the numbers a little bit so they overlap correctly now. Our positions are all keyframed. I'm just going to catch this one last time, and we should be good on that front. Okay, load from disk. Anyway, back to what we were doing. Going into our drill here with our chops. And I'll show you what I mean by the path. We'll just go every 6 frames and just kind of line it back up, because obviously each path is going to follow along the path, but some paths are longer than others, so it doesn't quite match up with this animation. So we'll just kind of fine tune it and then keyframe it a little bit as it goes along, so it lines up right there. Keyframe that, jump ahead 6 frames. Just make the animation line up with it. It'll be going fast, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So now we're just going to do the same thing for the bottom one. I'm going to copy this drill, and we'll rename this top drill and bottom drill. Let's collapse this top path and open up the bottom. We'll take off this grinding for a second, and our top drill. And we'll just delete this chop network and create an entirely new one for the bottom. Up one, so follow path, object, that one, our path, that, nope. And so now we have our chop network, and it'll drop down and be following along the path. We just have to change the keyframe here, Control Shift left click. And at frame 72, we should be at position 0. And frame 108, we should be at 1. And it should already drop down and lift up because we copied that from the top. Let's check it out. Okay. Let's look at our grinding here. Dive in. And we'll just do the same thing. We'll line it up with what's being cut right at that moment. And then it'll lift up. Okay. Make sure to save. So we have our 2 drills. We have the grinding. They're going around making it nice and clean shaven. I think one thing we got to do now is add sparks, because if we're grinding this down, there's going to be a lot of sparks coming from it. So let's take off this bottom drill. We're just going to work on the top drill for now. Take off this grinding, go to our top drill. So let's create the emitter for our sparks. Otherwise, sparks are going to be flying from everywhere. So we have our drill. We're going to set this aside. Let's select our drill right here. The bottom part, the actual part that does the grinding. So I'll select the primitives, hold tab, and type group. So we have these grouped up. We'll call this emitter. There's the 2 T's. And we're going to delete everything besides the emitter. Delete non-selected. So we just have our emitter here. We want him to emit the particles. One thing that will tend to mess us up, though, is we have this open gap right here. Houdini likes solid objects to be emitters. They don't like anything that's concave. So let's fix that. Edges. And our front. Select all these edges. And then I'm going to hold Control and deselect these except for the top. Go to our perspective tab and do a polyfill. That's just going to fill up this top for us. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's just going to be an emitter. And now we can do a pop network. Put this into the first. And our magic frame number was 72. We don't want it to emit anything until frame 72. So we don't want this right now. We're going to use our impulse activation instead of our constant activation. Impulse is frames, constant is seconds, if you recall. So we want to keyframe this at 0, and then at 71, we want it to be 0, because we don't want it to ramp up to our number. And then let's say 20. We want it to emit 20 particles every frame, all the way up until 108, also 20. And then at 109, a hard stop at 0. All right, so sparks, they move really fast. They don't live very long, certainly not 100 seconds. I'm thinking more 0.2 with a variety of 0.1, and they shoot really far. In this case, we want it to have its initial velocity, and we want it to shoot back really fast. So let's go by the z-axis here. Let's say 50. And then with the variance, we'll do something like 13, 13, 13, because we want it to spread out as it goes across our surfaces. But we just want it to fly. So let's I don't think it'll animate if we're looking at it here. Okay, so this is what our sparks are going to look like, but the cool thing about Houdini is it will turn with our object. So as our drill is following its path, it's actually turning, which means that the sparks will turn too. They won't all just face this direction. It will go along with the drill, so it'll look like it lines up with the object. So we have our sparks. That looks like sparks to me. They don't live that long, but they're shooting back crazy fast. Okay, let's hop up and see if it follows the drill. So let's do a merge just so we can see what both look like. It's going to drop down, start shaving all along our letters here. Sparks are flying, it's going crazy, it's making it nice and smooth. Perfect. Okay, so we have our pop net, but right now it's just particles. So if you watch any of my other tutorials, you'll know that our P scale is going to be off, and unless we add a velocity blur, which will also affect our drills. Let's do a trail this time for a different spark look. So let's save real quick, go to our render view, see how fat our particles are. Pretty fat. Let's make them skinnier. Let's drop down a point wrangle. Just the same amount of vex we did last time we did a point wrangle, nothing too scary. We want the attribute known as p-scale to equal 0.01. Always end with a semicolon. Check it out. That's more spark-like. Perfect. So we have the right size. Let's add a little bit of a trail. And wire this in. The display flag on there. And what this does is just adds additional particles. So let's look at this trail length. As we add more, it's just going to add more particles alongside its other ones. I don't want the sparks to be crazy huge, so I think 2 works pretty well. In order to visualize this a little bit better, let's go down to our polygons. And this is going to connect all of our points. That still looks pretty big to me. I'm going to drop this down pretty significantly. 0.17, get a nice spark trail going. Yeah, that looks pretty good. They get longer and longer. I like that. And we want to color our sparks. If you look at real sparks, where they are first emitted, they're red hot, but then as they go along, they cool pretty quickly, pretty significantly. So we want this red to yellow based on their age. Luckily for us, our pop network, when we created it, it added a couple attributes to our points. Let's go to our node info tab. And right here, we have a couple different point attributes that were created because of our pop network. And one of them is age. We can actually color our sparks based on their age and make it red at the beginning, but then they get yellow over time. Let's drop down a color node. And we want to ramp from attribute and just type in age. So now, right now it's going from black to white. We want it from red hot to cooler yellow. And we can ramp this down until it matches our scale here. Oh, too far. So it goes from red to yellow. Perfect. So now what we want to do is separate our drills from our sparks and make a different geometry for each one. Because we're doing different shaders and different materials on the sparks and the drill themselves, let's separate these. So for our top drill, let's drop down a null, and we'll call this top sparks. And dive up. And this is top, not top drill. We're going to make this top sparks. And then we'll copy this. Minimize our bottom path. And we'll call this one top drill. Dive inside. And just hit the display flag on this drill. We can just copy all of our information from the bottom to the top. Select all this. Control C. Go to our bottom drill here, Control V, and it's already all wired for us. Very nice. We'll call this one bottom sparks. Copy that. Bottom drill. Dive into that one and hit the display flag. One thing I did notice is we still have our path visible. We can just actually uncheck the display flag for that. So we'll just select every node here and hit this. No, that doesn't work. Okay, so we have to select each node individually. Kind of annoying, but that's the price we pay when we make a path this way. Select them all, uncheck this display flag so we don't see them anymore. And we'll do the same thing for the bottom. Just kind of clean up, make things a little more organized. You'll thank yourself later, especially if it's a long project like this is turning out to be. And guys, that is it for today's tutorial. I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product. Well, I'd say we're about halfway there. We're at frame 108. I'd like this to be a 10-second long animation. I'll do a flip book just to show you how far along I am, and we'll go from there. So I appreciate you guys watching me work on this little project of mine, just something that I've had in my head for a long time, just wanting to do. So I wanted to involve you guys in all the different practices that I'm doing for it. So if you have any suggestions on ways that I could improve on this, let me know. Also, if you have any ideas of simulations you would like to see done, you and I can tackle it together and we can figure it out. So just let me know. I love hearing from you guys. That should be it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.